haven't you seen this?
Thanks for joining us again on Why Haven't You Seen This? On this episode of Why Haven't You Seen This, I'm joined by the amazing, first off, my awesome friend, but also very talented actor, Jane McGrath.
Hello, Emily. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me.
No problem.
Jane has chosen the movie in this episode, and she's chosen
The Fifth Element, directed by Luc Besson.
Luc Besson, which came out in 1997.
Yes. He was 39 when it came out. Yeah, so quite young.
39, is that all he was?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And why The Fifth Element? Why might people not have seen The Fifth Element?
Well, the first time I saw this, I have two older brothers, and of course they'd always be watching action movies. So I would sit in and watch these movies with them. So I didn't really get it at the beginning, but as I got a bit older, I absolutely adored it because I love sci-fi anyway. And this is just like, it has action, comedy, love story, it's everything and then some, followed by like an amazing score as well. Amazing composer Eric Serra, and he just did fabulous music. And of course the amazing Jean-Paul Gaultier did all the styling and costume, and incredible actors. Yeah.
It is an awesome film. We've just finished watching it.
Yeah.
We have to preface
yeah,
that.
So I'm still fighting
fresh.
back the tears from the end of the film.
I know, and it's like it's mad to think because it came out in 1997, and it's now 2000. It's now 2020.
Yeah.
So we're 23 years later. My maths is not.
Oh
great.
No, I'm not good at maths.
23 years
no.
later. I think it's 23 years later. So actually, for 23 years later, I would say it holds up quite well. So anyone listening who's seen The Fifth Element and hasn't watched it in a while, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised that I think it's held up quite well.
Absolutely. And I think what's amazing about this film, because what I do love about sci-fi, it questions where are we now and what will happen. That's why I find sci-fi so exciting, and setting into a distant future in 2214 to be precise. So yeah, it still holds up. It's still very funny. Just even like, McDonald's is still there, 300 years.
More's the pity.
Yeah, of course.
It is mad because like I find I watched over Christmas I watched The Matrix. And that came out like 3 or 4 years later than this, and that was like revolutionary.
Yes.
And I actually find that's dated a lot more than this. Like there's elements of Fifth Element, like you say, there's a brilliant cast. It's really stylized, and it still works really, really well. And you've got the Jean-Paul Gaultier style all the way through it, and the costumes,
the leather, the black, the sunglasses, the slickness.
I love it.
Yeah,
it's so good. It's just, but it's still, even like 23 years later, but it hasn't dated because it's so high fashion.
Yes, yeah.
Now
exactly.
there are certain elements of the costumes that I noticed, and I was saying this to you while we were watching it. There's certain costumes in it, like it's some of the soldiers that are a bit sort of. What were those guys? The Power Rangers,
yeah, or Ninja Mutant Turtles.
Yeah,
got that vibe as well.
A bit tack. Some of them haven't aged well, but like for the most part, I think it has aged well, and a little bit of the effects and the CGI and stuff like that. I don't know if it was the CGI, but the digital effects, the visual effects, some of the ones in space are a little bit dated, but actually, like this came out the same time as Titanic, so it came out in 1997. And we were saying that there's kind of the parallels because they're on the big kind of floating ship, and when things go wrong, everyone's running for the exits and going for the lifeboats. But thankfully, in this case, there's plenty of lifeboats. So you'd want to think they would have learned from their lessons, but the irony of that. But so there's certain scenes where the effects are quite good. And actually, when I was doing research on it, I read that at the time, so in 1997, at the time, it was the most expensive movie to be made outside of Hollywood of all time at the time. Yeah. And it was the biggest budget ever for visual effects.
Yes, yeah.
Which is mad because I kind of think, but what about James Cameron? Because James Cameron must have spent a wee penny.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And the thing is, when I was looking at interviews with Luc Besson, he said the film was a nightmare to make because when you look at, Valerian, that was only out very recently, like Luc Besson thought of The Fifth Element when he was a 16-year-old teenager. But obviously he needed to do some growing up and all that kind of stuff. And when he finally got around to it, he said it was an absolute nightmare, just the visual effects, everything. Whereas Valerian, if he wanted like 2 million soldiers, he could just have it like that. Whereas back then in the 90s, you didn't have that, and even with the aliens, they're all actors inside these suits, which takes hours and hours to make. And then you arrive on set and they're like, oh no, the spaceship isn't ready, we're going to have to come back another day. And all these guys are already made up. So yeah, that kind of thing. But he was very much involved in the shooting of it because he was the DOP as well. And Bruce Willis was saying that he loved working with him because it was very immediate. He was right there. You're just kind of in this space with him rather than behind 100 crew and he's shouting from a speaker. He was right there. Yeah, so in comparison to Titanic, it's very different. Yeah.
It's a whole other bag altogether.
Yeah.
And it's funny, for me anyway, and I suppose I should probably backtrack a little bit because I like to think some people listening to the podcast, they'll have seen Fifth Element and been like, yes, love it, want to hear what you have to say. And on the other side, there might be people that be like, Fifth Element, heard of it, kind of know that it was somewhat of an action-y madcap action movie with Bruce Willis, but never kind of watched it. Maybe didn't seem to be somebody's bag, or somebody who maybe wasn't into action movies or anything like that. So just, I suppose, to give a little recap of it, it's a film set in, as you said, 22
say the 23rd century. Yeah.
And it stars Bruce Willis and Mila Jovovich and Ian Holmes and Gary Oldman, so it's a class cast, and it's ultimately and Chris Tucker and an absolutely brilliant performance by Chris Tucker, and I think that was kind of his kind of star was starting to rise at that point. It was pre Rush Hour.
Yeah. And
so the story is really about, it's a very simple concept, and which I quite like. It's not an overly convoluted plot, but ultimately there's a dark evil planet slash spirit,
pure evil,
just pure evil coming to destroy the world and mankind and everything in its path, and sort of predating Earth and time and everything, whereas these kind of good beings made up of 5 elements: earth, wind,
fire and water.
Heart. We were
Captain Planet, he's a hero.
Gotta take pollution down to 0.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was immediately what we thought of when we were watching it. But it and so there's 5 elements, and the 5th element is like this perfect being.
Yeah.
And it's the super weapon that's the only thing that can stop this evil. And the super being, the perfect being, they keep referring to it throughout the film as him.
Yes.
Automatically, of course. If it's perfect, it's a man. And I kind of like this because, I mean, obviously nowadays there's so much progress in terms of gender equality, or we're certainly compared to 1997. So I kind of feel like Luc Besson was a little bit of ahead of his time on the feminist agenda, because it was really nice that it ultimately the perfect being was in fact
a woman.
A woman.
But funny when you mentioned this perfect being Lilu, just regarding the casting, obviously it was very important to get the perfect role for Lilu. She is my favorite character of all time, and I think it's because I have this kind of obsession with feral beings. It's kind of that out of bottle thing where you have this person or this being in a completely different environment to they're used to, and you love seeing them being vulnerable and seeing things for the first time, and it's very childlike, very beautiful. But she is this very incredibly strong human. And it was interesting in the casting because Mila Jovovich said the first time she met him, it was like in a bar in New York, and she was like wearing a leather jacket, and she was smoking and stuff, and she felt, God, I'm actually way too cool for this guy, like proper New Yorker, and he's this European with this French twist in his films. And then eventually he met her again in LA, and she was just eating lunch in a t-shirt and jeans, no makeup, and he was just watching her. And she was just so primal the way she was eating. She was obviously very starving. When you see her eating the chicken, it's such a joy to watch. So he approached her and said, I want to do a camera test with you. And then he was like, you're Lilu. So that was really interesting. And she was phenomenal in the film. You have to give her that.
She's really good in it, and considering that she had very little dialogue, but then a lot of the dialogue that she had was like a made up language. I think herself and Luc Besson, I think, worked together to make up this language. I think it had sort of 400 words.
Yes, yeah. Well, when you watch it, you do believe it's a natural language, not just somebody speaking gibberish. Yeah, there's a lot of detailed work. It's amazing.
And there is attention to detail in this film, and that's I kind of love that about it. And I was kind of noticing throughout it, you know, it is very futuristic, and there's sort of throwbacks a little bit to, say, Blade Runner to a certain extent, albeit obviously not the same sort of style, but certainly there was elements of, you know, the futuristic feel of it. Yeah. But particularly on the sets, like when Bruce Willis's character Corbin Dallas is driving his cab, you know, you kind of there's a real tangible feeling, and I think it's a kind of a throwback to when movies were still very set heavy and very much about the sets around them. And I feel like, you know, like everything in his taxi is tangible, like you could,
it's tactile. Yeah,
it's tactile. Yeah. And particularly his apartment, like I was saying, I don't know if it was just me reading into it, but there was certainly elements I kept thinking about Alien, like there was like undercurrents of nods to Aliens, or like his apartment kind of reminded me of Ripley's apartment a little bit, and then there's a reference to the flamethrower in the Zorg's flamethrower, and that, which was his favourite.
Yeah, it also reminds me of, remember we were talking about Moon, that film with Sam Rockwell, and obviously he lives on the moon, and like with his spaceship, it was very similar to The Fifth Element. It was all quite blocky, you know, there was nothing slick, you know, like the way we have holograms and, you know, 3D printing and all that kind of stuff. And same in The Fifth Element, all the voices were very robot-y. Do you want some more? You know, you have 1 point left on your license. You know, there's you know, it was kind of quirky in that kind of sense, and very clumsy, which I really liked as well. Kind of gave me a giggle.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, I think probably because he chose to work with Jean-Paul Gaultier, there wasn't a purposeful approach to being camp, like the campness in it, because I was sort of like, oh, you know, like Demolition Man, which was also a film set in the future, you know, it was made a couple of years earlier, and I feel like the costumes in that, like, they still seem like absolutely futuristic. That's what people would wear. Whereas when you look at Fifth Element, there's certain costumes and certain things you think, that's real kind of tacky
absolutely. To a certain extent. And it's funny seeing the men dress very femininely, like especially Chris Tucker's character. He was saying, you know, he was in the middle of doing his stand-up. It's very contemporary and real, and then he has to step into this very feminine role, and he's like, I don't like dressing like this. So he found his character through the dress. And funny thing about the costume is that everything was worked on so hard, insofar as when an actor came onto set, they had no idea what was going to happen because it was so planned out. And to the point where Gary Oldman didn't know he was going to wear that ridiculous thing on his head, you know, that kind of shield with this weird kind of jet black wig over his face. And he said, you know, you just kind of roll with it, but you found your character through the costume. And Chris Tucker said that. He said, I had so much fun, and he kind of started feeling like Prince mixed with Michael Jackson. And
he carried it off really well.
So well,
yeah. And that's really interesting, because it was the two kind of observations I had made was to that, like Gary Oldman, like when you see him, Gary Oldman, for anyone listening who hasn't seen it, plays Zorg, the bad guy, and Gary Oldman
Arizona for some reason.
From Arizona. And probably one of my favorite villains ever, and Leon is another film that's probably one of my all-time favorites, and it's another Luc Besson film, and I think it's probably one of Gary Oldman's best performances.
Known as The Professional as well.
Known as The Professional, and it's just absolutely unreal performance, and he plays obviously Dracula and Bram Stoker's Dracula, and again he's just the epitome of evil. And then you see him in his costume as Zorg, and I said this to you when we were watching it, because I was like, how do you take him seriously as the bad guy wearing that outfit? But it's a real testament to Gary Oldman's skill that he just, particularly on the close-ups, like he's really so strong on the close-ups on his face. Like even when he's talking and when he's sort of being seemingly nice, He just has this deadness
in his eyes,
evilness in his eyes. It's just, I don't know if it's just because maybe Gary Oldman's secretly a little bit evil, or you know, he's just such an incredible performance. And similarly with Chris Tucker playing Ruby Rod the DJ, you know, his character is so, and I love that what you're saying about kind of Michael Jackson and Prince, and anytime he's on screen, the music is very much like Prince.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
Prince inspired kind of music. Yeah, it was interesting that, and again, there was something with gender there, because the scene when he's with Bruce Willis and they're being attacked and they're sort of under the snooker table under fire and they're moving,
scream.
and he's screaming. And it's sort of, and it's brilliant, and it's so funny, and he's such a great comedic lightness in the film. Immediately when I was watching back, I kind of thought, this was a movie in the 80s, that was a woman, that role was a woman's role.
Yeah.
And here we have it kind of flipped on his head. So I kind of really feel like Luc Besson was kind of miles ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely, totally.
And playing with the gender. And I suppose as well, speaking to the comedy, so some people might have written off Fifth Element and not gone to see it because maybe A, sci-fi, not my bag, fair enough. B, action, it's yet another action movie with Bruce Willis, but it's not really.
No, but that's another thing people go, it's another action movie with Bruce Willis, but he is so good in this. Like, as an actor, I'm just in awe of him, because yes, he's this strong, he's got this smouldering look, and you know, if you're going out into battle, you want him with you, but he's got this amazing vulnerability about him, and this very funny charm. You know, you're really on his side. And when he kisses Lilu when she's asleep, and you know, she puts a gun to his head, he's like, yeah, you're right, I shouldn't have done that, it was wrong to kiss you. It's just so endearing, you know, seeing him struggle to find words with this girl who he's just, let's face it, he falls in love with straight away. So you get a mixed bag with Bruce Willis in this film.
He's such a softie in it, because like
Absolutely.
Later when he goes to his apartment after that scene, the first thing he says as he comes in is, shouldn't have kissed her, and then he's like, oh no, I forgot to feed the cat. Like, he's just he's really like, and it's kind of, it's so endearing, because it's like on one side he's this highly decorated soldier who you know, badass, can kick serious ass, and then he's got this, is he the perfect man because he's got the sensitivity as well and the emotion, and
I don't know, taxi driver, not too bad.
He's a kind of a, I don't know, he's a mixed bag, but it's interesting. But then I kind of feel like people who kind of maybe say, oh, Bruce Willis action movie, but obviously Die Hard being he's not the only hero in this film. He's not, and that's the only what's film. Amazing. No, but even so, when people put him in that bracket, I mean, anyone who's seen Die Hard knows it's a comedy. It's a comedy. It's on Comedy Central,
so therefore
it is a totally comedy, and like all of the punchlines and the comedic moments. I mean, that's what he brings to Fifth Element. I would say. I kind of feel like he's almost the same character to a certain extent.
Yes, I agree with you. Yeah, totally.
But you're right. It's an ensemble cast, and it's like a fantastic. Ian Holmes is just. Oh gosh, Ian Holmes is like such a legend.
Brilliant. Yeah, when you do talk about the characters and then you go, oh yes, of course, they're amazing as well. But I also love the tiny characters in it. You know, you can tell Luc Besson really put his attention to detail in every single role in that film, whether it's their accent, where they're from, the way they dress. I think one of my favourite parts in the film is, you know, when Lilu is being chased, you know, the police are saying, we need backup, and they're just getting their McDonald's. And he's like, I'm too old, and he's just like, and I'm definitely too thirsty, and then all the drinks fall over him. It just little things like that. I think everybody was cast extremely well.
It was brilliant, and I love that in a movie, and it's interesting, and I don't mean to hark back to Die Hard, but it's something I always say about Die Hard. John McTiernan, who directed it, is that every little character, even if they're on screen for like 10 seconds, they make an impact. Like they provide a comedic moment or a reaction, but it's not kind of pointless. Everything sort of has a point, and I think all of the small roles in this, and even like Lee Evans is in this.
Yes, Lee randomly. Evans. I know, yeah, and he's brilliant as this little kind of. Did he say he was head of security? He looks like a little cadet.
He's
with
like
his...
the concierge on the ship.
Yeah. And he's got his little shorts and his little hat and his perfect American accent, of course.
Yeah.
And then you've got the character of David, Cornelius's little kind of sidekick, who's got this just nervousness and this sweat hanging off him, and you're just following this journey with all these characters.
And he does it so well, fun. Yeah. And Ian Holmes again, I suppose I was wrecking your head because of course I'm the ultimate Alien fangirl, so I was kind of like, Ian Holmes, it's Ash from Alien. I was like, I was convinced. I didn't see anything in the research, and this movie has just made me want to kind of go back and watch a lot more of the behind the scenes and the making of. I started to convince myself that Luc Besson there were subtle little throwbacks to Alien and homages to Alien in it, but it's just probably just me reading into like really teeny tiny little things, because ultimately it's very much its own. Yeah. It's his own stamp on sci-fi.
Absolutely.
Really.
And that's why he made the movie. He really attacked blockbuster movies and made it completely different, made a completely European twist on it, and I think he should be so proud of it. I know he's moving on, but like I'll always love that film. That's my favorite one of his.
It's so accessible as well. I think for people, like, when you put it in the box of an action movie, it's not. It doesn't sit in that box for me anyway. He just kind of makes it a lot more accessible for multiple audiences, because certainly people that I spoke to about The Fifth Element, a lot of people have said to me when they went to see it, like they went to see it because look, there was a big budget behind it, and it was there was a good push behind it, there was a lot of buzz behind it, but people were surprised at what they ultimately went to see. Like their expectation versus what was delivered was completely different, and I kind of love that. I love that Luc Besson kind of turned that on its head a little bit and presented something really fresh and really new. Like I think it cleaned up at a couple of award ceremonies, certainly for best editing, cinematography and sound. Like the music in this.
Music is just that xylophone. I like, obviously from beginning to end, the trajectory and the journey of the music is wonderful. Like at the beginning, the scene opens and the sky is black, and you have this real low kind of warped kind of industrial sound, something bad is coming, and not each character, but especially Lilo, she almost has her own little soundtrack, that very kind of fluttery kind of music. And then when she's obviously being born, this was Luc Besson's favourite part, is when she was being built, the classical music starts to come in, and it's just this beautiful score of watching this perfect being made. And as it continues on, then you've got that kind of Prince vibe from Chris Tucker, and then
random pockets of 80s music.
Yes, yeah. And then the amazing Diva song, which is complete. It's almost like a little pause where we sit back while the film goes into another gear change. And it's a funny story about the woman who plays the diva, because she was actually not supposed to play that part. It was a supermodel was cast for the part to mime the song, and so she was supposed to show up for her dress fitting. She never showed up. She just completely disappeared. They couldn't get in contact with her. Besson turned to his fiancée, Maya Wen, that's her name anyway. She was a fiancée. She was his fiancée, and he said, I really want you to do this. And she was so nervous. She hadn't done anything like this before. So she had 3 months training to sing. I was like, okay, did she actually sing? But no, she was training to mime perfectly, which she did, I thought, because for years I thought she was actually singing the song. She spoke about, how much hard work she did. What made me laugh as an actress is the fact that she said she was so disappointed that in the editing room that she wasn't in the full scene. Because they kept cutting to, Lilo kicking some alien ass and back at her. So she was like, I was just very disappointed that they just didn't keep my full performance. And it just made me laugh as an actress going, sometimes your stuff is going to be on the cutting room floor, okay? And you got to get used to it. And she said, this is lovely, when she was singing the song, how the feeling she wanted to put into song was how disappointed she was with human beings. And that kind of brought tears into my eyes, especially watching it again this time round. And then it cuts to Lilu, in the corner listening to her, and she's very emotional. And yeah, that's what it is. It's Lilo being very disappointed in human beings too. Even though the song is about a woman who marries this guy and she murders him in her bedroom and falls in love with somebody else.
That's intense.
Yeah, I read the lyrics and I was like, okay, that's different.
There's a lot of intensity in that. And there's a really nice shot of Bruce Willis watching her on stage. Apparently that take was the first take that they had disguised her, so he didn't see her on set. He had no idea what this operatic character was going to look like on stage.
Nobody saw her. She was a secret. She was kept a secret until the camera was going to be turned around on the audience, and she walked out.
I love that in filmmaking, when it's the first take and it's the react
and
genuine.
Go back to Alien.
Yeah,
you know when the alien pops out of the stomach, none of them knew that was going to happen. Yeah, that's the joy.
Okay, I'm convinced now. He was studying Alien. He's studying everything. But I do love that. I love that when directors do that, because it's all due respect to everybody's acting chops. Sometimes the best shot is actually to do the unexpected and get genuine, real human response. And there's something really, again, coming back to that sort of that softness in Bruce Willis. Yeah,
I love to go back to the softness, because speaking of the music, that xylophone, I'm obsessed with that xylophone. Near the end of the film, when he's got her in his arms, she basically says, what's the point in protecting life if you're going to destroy each other? And it does reflect on how we are in the world today. And when she looks back on the war images and everything like that, and he says, but love is worth saving. I'm getting emotional again. I know, so pathetic. But that's why the film is so simple in the end.
Yeah.
Because it's not just a big action movie. It's primarily about these two people falling in love, and it's worth saving, and that's how you save the world. It's so simple.
Yeah.
And it's so primal, and that's why I love this film so much.
Oh man, you're making me feel emotional now. But it is. It's like, it's such a simple concept. Like, the storyline is so simple, and then it's just like an absolute melting pot of like fun and comedy and music and costume, and then you've got this really just this massive heart at its core. And sending out that really simple message of
the fifth element is love.
Love will conquer all.
And
I think that's what gets most people out of bed in the morning. It's love for your family, love for your children, love for your friends. I think it's such a powerful, simple message, but such a powerful message. It's definitely worth rewatching certainly again. I hadn't watched it in, I'd say it was about 5 or 6 years since I saw it, and as I say, 23 years later, like, it's still brilliant. Like, there's small elements of the digital stuff that's a bit dated, but it doesn't tarnish it.
No, absolutely.
It's still such an enjoyable watch, and a testament to, as we said, a testament to the sets, a testament to the costumes and the actors and the cast. Like, it's just really such a good,
superb.
It's a good flick, and I'm always saying that, like, if you can go back and rewatch a film over and over and over again, despite the fact that you know what happens and you know the plot, but if it's something that, for me, if I have it on DVD, it's a rewatchable. That's a testament to a really, really brilliant film, and like that, you can put it in 23 years later and watch it and still really enjoy it, and it can make you laugh as it did us and tear up and get emotional.
I don't know if everybody would. I certainly do anyway.
But it's a really well-rounded film, because, like, for me as well, you can watch a great film and it could be, great costumes, great sets, great actors, great story, and the music's grand. But music is such an important part of a good film, and like, it is the music in this, it's and because we were talking about it as we were watching the film, I noticed the music a lot more in that it was actually so varied.
Yes,
because my memory of it, like, I remembered that it was sort of there was kind of the strange different types of sounds, and there was a little bit of sort of Prince music in it, but I don't remember it being as varied as it was, because there were pockets of scenes where it was like really cheesy, like Love Boat type 80s.
Yeah, there was a saxophone at one point when she comes out of the shower in Auto Wash, and it's just this real it's very subtle,
it's like
and it works.
He was pulling different music from different genres even. And so it was like that melting pot again, which I really, really loved. And I like that because it's great when a film has a similar tone and a kind of an identity in the music all the way through, but I kind of like that this sort of plays around with different sounds and
the kind of Middle Eastern music as well when they're having that car chase. It's brilliant. It's really superb.
It's so good. So Jane, what would be your parting advice for anybody who I'd like to think now that, you know, most people have seen The Fifth Element, and hopefully by listening to this episode of Why Haven't You Seen This, it will make you want to rewatch it and go back and watch it. And if you haven't seen The Fifth Element, then hopefully it's not too much spoiler alert. Regardless, it's so good. It is such a good movie and it's so worth watching. So this was your pick. So for you, what, you know, if somebody's sort of listening to this going, will I watch it, won't I watch it, what would you say to people?
When I describe a film to somebody, all my emotions just come at once, because you know when people say, well, what's it about, what's the film about, I'm just like, there's a bit in it, you know, this happens and this happens. You just get so excited. I think you gotta watch this movie because it's the full package. You know, if you're sitting in with a few friends, it's great to watch. If you want to watch it on your own, you know, it's you can switch off. You can also be really invested in it with this amazing love story and just listen to it for the soundtrack, the style. It just has the whole bag for me. That's why I love it so much, and that's why I think you guys should watch it.
Right, you've been told.
You can't. Good.
You got to check out The Fifth Element. Jane McGrath says so.
Yes.
And so do I. It gets my stamp of approval. Yeah, so go and watch it. Why haven't you seen this?
Why haven't you seen this?
Why, oh why? Why haven't you seen this? Why, oh why? Why haven't you seen this? Why, oh why? Why haven't you seen this? Why, oh why? Why haven't you seen this?